Hi, and welcome to the Red Tunic Podcast, a podcast where I look to rediscover what makes gaming fun and enjoyable by having positive conversations with those related to the industry. My name is Link, and today I'm joined by Nix, designer and director at VA Studios, currently working on Silent Santicado. Hi, Nix. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Link. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Thank you for asking. I just want to say before we get started, thank you so much for making the time and agreeing to this. I really appreciate you lending yourself to me for this next hour or so.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. This is my first voice interview. You have the honor of doing this. So hopefully I don't make too many mistakes, but I appreciate you giving me this opportunity.
Well, I will say to that, I really hope I'm I really hope I don't ruin the whole voice interview medium for you. Um, I hope it all goes well on both our parts, I suppose is the best thing to say.
We'll do fine. It's going to be great.
So, Nix, as well, I just want to say Happy New Year and, what have you as well. Since it is very early in the year, I hope that, if you celebrate or if you, take time or what have you, whatever you do, I hope the last couple of weeks have been nice and relaxing, to say at the very least.
Yeah, they have been because someone in the family got COVID, so our plans were canceled and I didn't have to do anything. I got to stay home.
Uh, okay, well,
Yeah.
I, part of me wants to say I'm happy to hear that, but at the same time, I don't want to say that.
Eh,
Um,
they'll all be fine, I'm sure. But,
I hope everyone, I hope everyone is able to recover and get the rest they need, and
yes.
what have you. But at the same time, I'm happy to hear that you did not have a lot of running around to do over the break or what have you.
Yes.
I think that's
Holidays
the
are, yeah, hectic.
I think that's the best way to hedge that one.
Yes, I'm throwing a curveball at you. I know with that response, but I mean, it's what we expect nowadays, right? With gatherings, sometimes it
Y-
happens.
that's very fair. So Nix, before we get started, if you don't mind, can you maybe wow, can you maybe tell me and anyone who's listening a little bit about yourself, just so we have a better idea of who you are?
Sure. I go by Nix online. I'm a game developer. I've been working with VA Studios for some amount of years since I left college, um, somewhere around 6 or 8 years. I started as an artist on a project that was already in development at VA. And when the designer had to leave due to some non-compete clause or some nonsense like that, I stepped up to the design role. And unfortunately, that project was canceled, but continued on, took what we learned from that, and are applying it currently to Silent Santicado, which is a project I'm serving as an artist, designer. Uh, it's the one that you can see on my Twitter page, the one that you saw when you reached out to me. And we are also working on a second unannounced game where I'm working as a design director as well.
So thank you for for explaining that, and that's really neat. Getting to uh, well, I shouldn't say neat because it's not really probably not wasn't a good time for your previous coworker, but just how you got promoted up. I guess you would say that's an interesting way that it has happened. I honestly don't know if that happens often, but it's always interesting to hear just how certain paths play out when you have no hand on that wheel.
Yeah, I think it's pretty common probably at small studios, at indie studios. It's kind of a requirement that you wear different hats. I suppose if I didn't reach out, I was doing some soul searching at the time. I realized I didn't really want to work on art. I wanted to do design, so it was convenient timing. But if I hadn't done it, I'm sure the director would have just found someone else to be the designer, and who knows, maybe I wouldn't be working on Santicado now if I hadn't made that decision then, or if the director didn't humor me and allow me to move into a different role.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there, and um, it's just I recently watched Starship Troopers, so it's reminding me of one of the lines. I'll do the role until you find someone better, or until I die, or you find someone better, or something like that. Um, Maybe not as uh, what's the word? A dramatic, but
Yeah.
kind of holds the same kind of weight, I guess, maybe.
Yeah. You need someone's got to be designing the game. Why not me, I guess.
So, speaking of Silent Santicado, I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in the email when I first reached out, that I think the design aesthetic is really fantastic. Like to me, it looks like a adult, or sorry, a grown-up Game Boy game. And when I say grown-up, I mean like if the Game Boy was made with the same kind of mentality that it was, 20, 30 years ago now, uh, but with the same kind of like palette restrictions. Um, and I mean that in like the best of ways possible, because like it feels like a old game, but it obviously based on the complexity of what it's going to be, and by today's standards and whatnot, it's probably not going to be like that. But aesthetically, I think it looks fantastic, just because I grew up with a Game Boy, and just seeing like the way that the minimal palette is done and everything, it really speaks to me in a really fantastic way. I hope that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. I appreciate the compliments as well. That if you scroll far back enough in my Twitter feed, you'll see the original look Santicado look completely different and a completely different gameplay as well at one point. And I just as a little side thing, there's this artist goes by Mako, MA-KO, and they do the illustrations, digital illustrations. At least I think they're digital. And I just really like their art style, and I just wanted to see if I could convert it into pixel art, and have pixel art that feels like it has something of an illustrative quality to it. And I did that. I duplicated Sandicado's Unity project. I just slapped the new art in, posted a GIF of it on Twitter, and it was, I'm pretty sure, the best performing tweet that I had up till that point. I think it's the first tweet I had that broke 4-digit likes. And so I did it again. I just did a different palette, a slightly different GIF. It did well again. I did a third time. It did well. There's diminishing returns, but it was doing well. And people were noting in the comments, they're saying this feels like illustrated. It has this weird illustrated quality that's really interesting and unique, which is very encouraging. Because it meant that I managed to succeed in doing that. Um, and I made the decision at that point to just redo, just make that's what Sandicato looks like now because people like it so much. Um, and I definitely understand the modern Game Boy sort of feel as well. I've gotten comments like that in the past as well. And I think it makes a lot of sense as well. There's some elements of the art style, like the not just the art style, but the technical side as well. The limited color palette, but it's not exactly limited in the way that like a Game Boy color palette is, where they're obviously reusing the same like shade of green on different things. Like the red bricks and red part of the Mario are the same shade, but it's still limited. We're using tiles, but we're also using like collage style background assets. You would see something like Hollow Knight. So it makes sense because I mean it is a blending of kind of old techniques with a modern game dev environment.
And thank you for explaining that, because I didn't know about the shift in the design. Like I'm gonna definitely go back through your Twitter and try and see if I can go far back enough to like find that, just because I'm curious what the big difference is now. But it's interesting to hear that, based on uh, the reaction of everyone, that you guys just sort of went, well, I guess this is the style now. And, I'm not trying to say that in a negative way. But that's a lot of trust you had for the people following the game, to kind of sway that, if that makes any sense.
Hmm. Yeah, it's hard to know um, when you should make that kind of that big of a decision because it is a big risk. Um, but yeah, and sometimes gotta take risks. And I mean, it was doing so well compared to the previous one, and there were some issues as well with the previous designers already kind of like considering doing a slightly different direction. Anyways, um, yeah, you know, I don't want to say sometimes you just have to go for it because it wasn't like a completely uninformed decision, I suppose. Um, but sometimes you just know when it's time to make a change. You got to go for it.
I understand. I think I understand what you're saying. I think everyone kind of understands that when like, you're trying to you're thinking of what to do next and you have a few ideas out in front of you. And, maybe not in this situation, but in different ones, maybe the path forward is kind of on equal balance with some other ones. But then when you have a lot of positive reaction or people weighing in saying, "Oh no, this is the path you should take," it kind of makes it easier to um, what's the word we use? Alleviate your concerns or stresses. Um, so having people kind of back you up, I think, is always fantastic when you're trying to make a potentially huge change, whether it's changing the art style or a life change or what have you, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's a risk to make the change, but not changing is a risk in its own right. Uh, you're risking going with an idea that ultimately is not going to be as successful as your new idea. What you're currently doing isn't necessarily the right thing just because it's what you've already been doing or what you already planned. I think that's something game devs, and unless I don't know, maybe some expert game dev out there who's always right about everything wouldn't experience this, but one of the sayings you sometimes will hear in game dev is that there's the game you plan to make and then there's the game you actually make. It's kind of inevitable that these sort of decision points are going to come up in your development process. And I think part of one of the benefits of being an indie dev, but also a responsibility that developers have, is being flexible and being able to respond to those decision points and make changes.
You know, I Yeah, that all makes total sense. Um, and I personally, I've already said I like this style, so I really hope. Well, it sounds like there's already a lot of people that also are on the same page. So I really hope the game itself pays, it's successful, that it works out well, because I can't think of any other games that have done a similar kind of uh aesthetic, the minimal palette and such, where it's all combined in the way that it's presented from what I've seen. And I'm absolutely in love with it, is basically what I'm trying to say. And I hope that it goes well, because I would like to see maybe more people try and capture a similar kind of feel, just because I'm 30, I'm almost 35 now. By the time this episode comes out, I will be 35, and me thinking back on the nostalgia of the Game Boy, or the era where this is something I would have been playing, is weighing heavily on me, you know.
Yeah. Well, happy future birthday, whenever that is happening.
Well, thank you. About a week or so from now, something like that. I don't really remember. I'm horrible
Yeah.
at dates.
Yeah, when you're 35 or thereabouts, it's another day, right?
Yeah, I'm getting ready to pack it in. I'm old enough. I've got a few more good years, and
Yeah.
it's round the bend.
Yeah, we don't need birthdays anymore.
So, next, I believe you mentioned that you've been working towards like the game industry for quite a few years now. Do you mind speaking to how it is that you got into developing and making games?
Well, I went to college for it. I graduated and I started working at VA. There, any, I don't have any moment. I booted up Super Mario and it blew my mind. It changed my view of what's possible in this world. I have wanted to make games as for forever. I wanted to make them in elementary school. I somehow wanted to make them when I was too young to know what a job was. I didn't even like understand that people made games. Um, and I just pursued it my whole life. And here I am, and I'm making games now.
So that's great to hear that you were able to effectively go to school for it, had success in that, and then immediately kind of walk out uh, into a studio because a lot of people. Um, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase it. But like a lot of people, you'll often you'll go to school for something, and it's hard to break out into it. So it's good to hear that you were able to find that kind of success or you know chance.
Hmm.
Sorry, I don't know the right phrasing without
Yeah,
trying to make it sound disrespectful to you because I don't mean it in any disrespect to say that you were able to luck out and walk out into that into gaming right out of school. Does that make sense?
yeah, and I mean it makes sense. Yeah, having that opportunity. That's always how it goes. Skill is a requirement, but it only gets you so far. Luck is always a part of it. Um, but yeah, being able to work at VA, pretty nice. Pretty nice being able to uh, be directing a game. Certainly, even if it's just a tiny little indie game, even if we have our struggles trying to get a publisher and all that, um, I'm still thankful that I'm able to do the thing that I've always wanted to do.
And I think at the end of the day, that's the most important thing, right? I spoke with someone, and I'm gonna paraphrase them, but they basically said, like you don't get into making games to make money. You get into games because it's what you want to do. It's because what you like love the idea of doing. And it's great that that's effectively what you get to do right now is the thing that you wanted to do, and you're get to like actually do it, right?
Yeah, I don't know what else I'd be doing with my life if it's not game dev. It's the only thing I've ever wanted to do. What else would I do?
So, Nix, I don't know how this answer is going to go, and I only preface that because usually when I ask people, they'll have, a different trajectory into how they got into making games. But from your experiences, do you have any words of wisdom to share?
Yes. Uh, so there are a lot of horror stories out there. Not even horror stories, like horror statistics about how all these games fail. Um, Indie games, namely, don't really go anywhere. And it is true, a lot of games do fail. They fail, however, I think for two reasons, or at least one reason and then one kind of category of reasons. First, and this is the hard one, I'm getting it out of the way now. This is the one that the obvious one that people don't say even though it's obvious, and that's you have to make good games. I don't know how to tell you to make good games, just have to figure that one out. But the cold hard reality is that games that succeed aren't necessarily doing it just because they got lucky or because they're exploiting like I don't know human brain algorithms or something. Like they're succeeding because they're doing something well, and you need to be able to compete at that level. The good news there is that a lot of these games that fail, frankly, aren't that good. There are a lot of asset flips, a lot of low effort games since Steam lowered the threshold. So if you are partially competent, if you have a skilled artist, if you have any asset that can make you stand out, work with that. Bring that to the forefront of your project however you can, because you have a good chance of standing out. But if you can't, then you need to develop your skills. You need to get to an acceptable level of quality. Because again, you're competing with a ton of different people. The second bit of advice is I think a lot of projects fail for project management related reasons. That's managing your scope, having the right team and skill set available. Um, marketing as well. You could kind of lump marketing or the marketing plan in with that. I think people still operate on this idea of like, if you make it, they will come. Like you just make a good game. I guess kind of based on my previous advice, you can't just make a good game and expect success. Your marketing needs to be done before your game comes out, so you need to have a plan ahead of time. And it's overwhelming managing all of that. But if you're an indie dev, especially, I think being intellectually curious about the process and just learning what goes into it. Like if you decide to get a publisher, which I recommend you do, look into what publishers need. All right, they need a pitch deck. What's a pitch deck? What does a good pitch deck look like? It needs a budget. How do I make a budget? You have to put in the work, and you have to put that work in before your game is actually released. Or you might find yourself part of that statistic. That
So
was a bit
thank you.
rambly. Oh, sorry.
No,
That was
no
a bit
worries.
rambly. I hope it made sense.
I think it makes a lot of sense. I think the first part, basically make a good game, I think uh, is kind of half the battle, right? Because like you can have a beautifully done game, you can have, the best aesthetic, the best design, the best whatever, whatever, whatever. But if the gameplay isn't any fun, isn't any good, you're not going to win people over. And like I think I don't know where, like, I don't know who I saw this from. I've seen it from a few people kind of saying the same stuff, though, on Twitter right now. And it's basically the argument against how some games right now, if a big, AAA studio is going to put out a new game or start working on a game now, it's probably not going to be till next gen. And I think some of the arguments I've seen against that now have been, lower budget, drop it from like AAA, put it to like AA, put it to whatever, but make like a smaller, shorter game, make it a more like a tighter game, and that because if it's not all about the look, and if studios are pushing for that now, and the next game is going to be on the next console generation, it probably means it's because they're pushing for graphic fidelity, well, maybe not balancing it as much or putting as much of the focus on what could be a much tighter and fun game, just not looking as pretty. And I think a lot of people probably uh don't care as much about the graphics in the sense of like high blockbuster kind of what have you, as much as they'd care for just a fun game that they could actually enjoy uh today. And like, we've seen, I think with kind of like the indie scene now, that kind of supports it, in my opinion, because, there are, not to speak against any indie titles, because there are a lot of indie titles that do kind of bust out high fidelity, high graphic stuff miraculously. And I only say that because, when you look at like the size of those teams, you're like, how are you doing that? But they pop out, these smaller games that are, doing really well. And I think all that speaks, to that point that you made of make a fun game. Sorry, I kind of got away with it there and hopefully pulled it back proper.
Yeah, no, I get you. And like if Dwarf Fortress can succeed, anyone can. I shouldn't say that because Dwarf Fortress is a good game, but in terms of art, what you're saying about art style, yes. But there are some limits, certainly. Like I know people are critical of there's some Pokemon games, Arceus and the new Scarlet and Violet, of their art being a bit subpar. Um, I suppose when it comes to games, the line between art and technicals issues kind of is blurry. I mean, there's technical art, there's a whole discipline in game dev. Um, but I think especially when it comes to indie games, I do feel like people are surprisingly forgiving when it comes to art in particular. If you have really good art, or not necessarily really good art, but unique art, perhaps, that can serve as a selling point. But if the game is bad, the gameplay is bad, then the game is bad. There's no way around it. No amount of art is going to make up for it.
Yeah, exactly. And and I don't mean this in any negative way when I use this example. But I think Cruelty Squad is a fantastic example of that. Just because the gameplay, the minute to minute, the gameplay, all of that for the Cruelty Squad is absolutely fantastic. But the art style, as unique as it is, I question how well it would have done without that gameplay behind it, only because um, until you've given it an hour or three, it really just looks like noise. And I think that kind of like speaks to having to have those two things go hand in hand in a sense.
Yes, and I will I will say good art is always worth doing. Uh, Good art is subjective. Could put a pin in that. Come right back to it because we're going to talk about Cruelty Squad. But art is always worth investing in because that's what people see first when they're browsing through your whatever marketplace, whatever storefront you're in, and you're looking at screenshots and trailers. You can kind of gauge gameplay. I mean, you can obviously like what the genre is, but you can kind of, if you're experienced with the genre, like a platform or something, you look at the way the character moves in the trailer, you can kind of get a feel for how the game probably feels. But really, the art is what's hooking you in first. And a lot of games, a lot of indie games that succeed in spite of having less than ideal art are probably succeeding through word of mouth, and they're being reassured, people are being reassured by their friends or whatever that you just look past the art, it's actually a good game. Because those games probably, even if they are good games, they may not succeed if we're just purely going through um, how likely any given person is to click on those games on Steam. But something like Cruelty Squad, the art is non-traditional, we'll say, but it's got a thing going on. It's got something there. The people that want a game like this, they like it. They like what they see on Steam. Um, it's hard to give any advice or anything like that. This is certainly a risk. It's polarizing. Though I will say there's some benefit to that also in a crowded space with games being as big as they are. If you commit hard enough to whatever crazy stuff you're doing, there might be people out there, and there might be enough people out there that are willing to give it a chance.
Exactly. Now, not to spend too much time on Cruelty Squad, just because that's uh, not you're like that's not what you're making and all that. Just
Yeah.
so not to spend too much time, but I do agree with what you're saying. Um, Now, with that in mind, you did mention earlier, briefly, that Super Mario was kind of the game that made you like realize what a game could be, or what have you. I'm sure I fumbled that up, and by all
Was
means, I will get. Sorry.
there was no game that made me. I
Oh,
did mention that it was my first game. I'll say it didn't make me real. I was a stupid kid when I played it. It didn't make me realize anything.
okay. Sorry, I misunderstood then. So thank you for correcting me, because
No problem.
I was going to fumble that up. However, you just said there wasn't really any game that changed your view. So was it gaming as a whole that like the moment you started playing games, you were like, oh wow, this is what my I want my life to be?
I guess so. Because the first game I played, I got a Game Boy Color, a Pokemon Edition Game Boy Color, and I got Super Mario Brothers and Pokemon Yellow, and I liked them both very much at the time. And then I got a Dreamcast and I got Sonic Adventure, and I liked that very much at the time. We might come back to it. There's a certain question on this list Sonic Adventure might be an answer to, but uh, I don't. It's. I think I just started playing games and then kept playing them. It was at that age when that's like what kids were doing like Pokemon Yellow just come out. It was like huge phenomenon. Um, and then you play Pokemon, and then you start doing Yu-Gi-Oh and Digimon as well. You grow out to those. You play Sonic Adventure, and then you start playing Mario or the 3D Mario's or whatever else. So once you got a game console, you're going to Best Buys or BJ's or wherever, just looking for whatever games you can get because you're a kid and there's no internet. You just play whatever you can get. Um, and it just kept going. Yeah, I don't know.
That's very fair. Um, so let me kind of twist that question a bit then, just because, and I'm worried that it's going to be a similar answer, and if it is, that's perfectly fine. But do you have a favorite game then?
I have two. One of them is a little outdated. Um, I'm not sure if it's still my favorite. It might be. But the first is Shadow of the Colossus. Um, I don't want to make any games like it, but it's a very good game. Yeah, it's a real cool game, that Shadow of the Colossus. Um, and I guess I don't know. I always thought of it was niche, but like it got a PS3 remaster and a PS4 remake, so I guess someone out there's buying it. But I like that game quite a lot, even though I was still kind of a kid when I played it. And the other one that I'm not entirely sure if it's still my favorite or not is Dark Souls, the original Dark Souls. Um, I'm such a big fan of the Souls games, and I played all of them. But it's been so many years, I feel like I'm maybe getting a little burnt out on the formula at this point. But I just can't quite. I don't know if it's still better because it is quite dated in some ways. Um, but that game had a big impact on me. I already wanted to make games by the time I played it, but that uh, I like to think in some parallel world where Miyazaki and From Software didn't make it, that Dark Souls is the kind of game that I would make. It just does everything I want a game to do.
You know, I can understand the mentality of potentially like being burnt out on the Souls-like genre, especially when you're thinking back on whether or not one of the first games in it in that genre. I think Dark Souls is probably what cemented the genre after Demon Souls. But I can understand maybe having conflicting thoughts on if it is still one of your favorites, just because, like you said, getting burnt out is a very real thing. And uh, around like shortly after those games came out, we saw like a huge, huge indie boom of just that kind of style, that kind of genre. So, um, I think I'm not speaking directly to you, but I'm meaning like I think in general for people that like that, they might, we might see in a couple years when that's kind of cooled a little, and newer things are being done with it, we might start seeing what's the word I want to think, a retrospective and rediscovering the older ones and realizing again what the charm was of the early days of them, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean it's fitting. I guess Santicado is a Metroidvania Souls. I hesitate to call it a Souls like. It's inspired by it in some ways. And that's a pretty big thing. There are a lot of Metroidvania Souls like. The people on r/Metroidvania complain about it, but those people think Symphony of the Night is good, so who cares what they think, right? But hottest take you're gonna warning me before the show. Is there anything you don't want to talk about? I just dropped that massive hot take, so you can ask me anything at this point. But it the it's interesting because the Metroidvania subgenre um, had cooled for a while, and I think people probably mostly credit Hollow Knight for the resurgence. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe there's some other games, but that's going through a whole new thing now. So it'll be interesting in the future. Yeah, maybe something similar will happen with Souls likes.
Yeah, and I'm thinking on it right now, and I do have a follow-up question from your hot take. I promise it's going to be far gentler than I think you would be expecting. However, I don't really can't think off the top of my head like what it was that actually restarted the whole Metroidvania spree, because it kind of that genre kind of resurged with a bunch of other smaller genres that were being mixed in and resurging or coming about all around the same time. So I can I can maybe understand some of the ire that the immediate mix in from like a roguelike or a souls-like or what have you into that genre would cause for people, just because like I said, it kind of came about all in a very short time span. So yeah, the ire would make sense. Now the follow-up to the hot take that I would like to ask, because of that, is there a Igavania game, or just a normal Castlevania game, I guess, that is a Metroidvania, because I don't believe he had his hands in all of the you know Metroidvania ones that came after. But do you have one that you like more, or you think is more fitting of the name then? And I apologize if that is if I'm unaware of how much of an actual hot take question that would be.
What that I like more than Symphony of the Night?
That you would say is more fitting of like the good status name, because you
Yeah.
would indicate you didn't like Symphony of the Night. Um, so I'm meaning more, was there like a Metroidvania game, like an actual Castlevania Metroidvania, so Igavania or
Yeah.
what have you, that you actually do think is the better one in your opinion for for your own tastes?
Yeah. All of them. Jesus Christ. All the DS ones, I think, even Portrait of Ruin, I think is better. I think Dawn of Sorrow, that's the easy answer, and it deserves it. I think Dawn of Sorrow is head and shoulders above Symphony of the Night. Um, that's on the Castlevania side. To expand the question, I think Super Metroid on the Metroid side has held up quite well. Um, but Castlevania wise, yeah, Dawn of Sorrow.
And I think that's a very fair answer. Personally for me, uh, I my first Game Boy Advance game was um, Circle of the Moon. I don't know why it wasn't called Circle of Full Moon. Full Moon. I've always in my head thinking that's what it should have been. It doesn't make sense to me. But that was my first Metroidvania game. I for whatever reason when I was younger, I never really played Super Metroid, and I wasn't really a PlayStation kid, so I never played Symphony of the Night. So much to the ire of some of my friends who, were offended that I said it was a good game, which I stand by, it still is. Um, but then I agree completely that all of the DS games, all of the DS Castlevanias, I felt were also very fitting. Were fantastic with Dawn of Sorrow just being great. Like I specifically when I was younger acquired the Nintendo Wi-Fi dongle just so I could run a store all day to get more money so I could actually buy things in the game so I didn't have to grind for it.
Uh-huh.
And it worked well for me. I didn't have to spend a bunch of time grinding for things. And I don't know now why that was such an issue for me, but it worked in my favor, and yeah. I agree completely though that the DS ones are absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, you can work smarter, not harder, right?
So, I am curious then, uh, because you had, mentioned maybe we'll get to it or it's another question. I'm going to assume that that was relating to Sonic Adventures.
Sonic Adventure. Uh,
Um,
yeah,
can you speak to what question you feel that should fall under, and then we'll go from there.
yeah. A game that you enjoyed as a child that might not hold up today.
So can you elaborate on that? Because I'm not going to lie, it's been a while since I've tried playing Sonic Adventure, and um, I have, I want to say, mixed opinions of it. And I think for me, since I didn't play it as a child, outside of like the demo booths at like Toys R Us, getting to try a Dreamcast, which my mind was blown because at the time I think I played like a 64. I had a 64 and nothing else at the time. So, in my mind, that was amazing. And then when I've tried it since then, I didn't have the nostalgia to it. So for me, um, my answer or my take on that would be vastly different than yours. So do you mind speaking to that?
Yes, Sonic Adventure. I think it's the first 3D Sonic game. I don't know maybe there's some secret Sonic game out there I don't know of. I'm pretty sure it's the first 3D one. It was on the Sega Dreamcast. It would later have a DX version released on the GameCube. And it is, I think it was also, I think it kind of marked the transformation Sonic had into like the new modern Sonic, where he had a new design and he's voice acted by some cool skater guy voice. Uh, the whole
The 90s?
90s, yeah, 90s Sonic. Um, I will say, to speak to some praises, I do think of the Sonic 3D Sonic games I've played, it is the one that feels the most like Sonic to me. It's still got Robotnik and he's putting little animals and robots and all that. Sonic Adventure 2 is where things really kind of jump the shark. But so it manages to do that. And it has some good ideas gameplay wise, but the execution is really poor. It's really all over the place. There are multiple characters. One of them, Big the Cat, is just you're doing fishing mini games. I don't know who thought that the gotta go fast character is where we're gonna put an entire campaign worth of fishing mini games. Uh, Amy, yeah, there's a playable campaign for Amy. She moves really slow. Again, I just don't understand, and it's really buggy. The story sucks. It's just a generally kind of incompetent game. But the second bit of praise, backhanded praise, I'll say, is that it is the only game I've played that I feel it's like it's so bad it's good. It's just funny to play in a way like Sonic Adventure 2 is like not broken enough. It's kind of like too competent. Its story is still weird, but you know, Sonic Adventure occupies a special place in my heart, but it's not a good game. And if you think it is, you're coping. Gotta
So
say it.
so, I think that's probably the first time I've heard someone say the sequel wasn't as good because it wasn't janky as enough or as much. Um, that's a first for me. And uh, as someone that enjoys Eurojank, that's I think that's an absolutely fine statement and a fine preference to have to be like, well, no, it's too competent because if some of the charm was the jankiness, um, when you take the charm away, it's not as fun, right? So I can dig it. I can understand. I think there's probably other people that can respect and agree with that line of thought.
Yeah, and it's good. It's a good game to play with a friend who also knows what's up. Kind of like bad, like you can enjoy watching So Bad It's Good movies on your own, but it's always like way better when there's someone with you to laugh at the thing with. But you play Sonic Adventure and it's like it works. There's nothing to laugh at.
Yeah, I 100% understand what you were saying, and I agree because sometimes the joy is the shared experience of it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm Nix, I'm afraid to ask this question because, we just followed up from you saying the sequel to Sonic Adventure wasn't janky enough for you. Um, what is it that makes games enjoyable to you today? And I'm only worried because, if you say janky, I'm going to be um, kind of confused and kind of concerned at the same time?
Yeah, that's why I'm in game dev. I make bad games on purpose. Now that's a unique case. Sonic Adventure is a very unique and special game because it's terrible and it's old and it was the first 3D game I played. Not at all like what I normally enjoy. What I what I think I most enjoy is the fantasy and the world aspect, the world building of games. It's it's one of those things. because they're again, I said I like Dark Souls. I play other Souls likes, and it's just so weird because I played Demon Souls just on a whim almost, and that's kind of what got me into it. And I, of course, moved on to Dark Souls, and that's just like what I expected. That just set the standard for me for not just Souls like, but I guess action RPGs or like that style of action RPG in general. I go and play other Souls likes, and it's like I don't know the like the world design, the enemies, the story, like it just isn't as good. Something's just not right here. That Dark Souls got just happened to get right, and I just happened to play that first. Um, and something Shadow of the Colossus I think does well, and a way simpler. Uh, there's like one paragraph of dialogue in that. Well, I guess if you're counting the hints that you get, there's 2 paragraphs we'll say of dialogue in that game. The world is very sparse, but it feels thought out and intentional. And that sort of you could call it immersion, I guess. That ability to experience a sort of a different setting, something I really really enjoy in games, and I enjoy putting together in the games that I make.
So, it's great to hear that that's what you're able to take from those kind of games, like moving forward or thinking forward to apply that same kind of design philosophy, if you will. Um, because, that's I'm trying to think of the Souls-like games that I've played, and you know, for lack of a better, they do kind of lean on some for the ones that I played at least, not to try and speak ill to a whole set, or even the ones I played. I had a blast playing the ones that I have played and what have you. But they do kind of tend to lean on a very similar trope as all of the current ones for that came from like Dark Souls or Demon Souls. And I think I don't know if this is going to be a hot take, but I'm wondering or thinking, if someone else also kind of just goes and takes a bunch of influence, quote unquote, or finger quotes, what have you, from Berserk, we might end up with something on equal grounds, or maybe not equal grounds, but um, a good step up from some others.
Hmm.
Like I said, I'm hesitant to walk into that one, but um, I'm wondering if we see some people focusing more on the maybe not dark fantasy, but focusing on the like establishing a hard fantasy set of rules as a background, as opposed to just some gentler ones to just kind of act as a skeleton. Um, we might see like an improvement in that direction if what I'm saying makes any sense.
Yeah, and I mean ultimately, just gotta be inspired in some way. You can. There are a lot of games out there. Maybe not Souls likes exactly. Well, there's some Souls likes. The Surge 2, still not on the level of Dark Souls, but it had some cool ideas that Dark Souls didn't have. Honestly, we don't even have to talk about it. I guess we could talk about Dark Souls 2 because that's the one that Miyazaki did not direct, and that shows up in a lot of bad ways. I think Dark Souls 2 deserves a lot of the criticism it gets. That game just feels weird. Um, I've seen the reviews. I've seen H Bomber Guy, Joseph Anderson, I think his name is. Um, None of them talk about the way that game controls. It controls weird, and I don't like it. But it does some weird things with the bonfire aesthetics, some other mechanics with the boss souls being different in New Game Plus that the original game just didn't do, and they didn't do in Dark Souls 3 either. Um, so yeah, you can take Dark Souls and use it as a blueprint for a game and just stick some cool new idea you have on top of it and just kind of leapfrog in that way. Or you could try and reinvent it. Instead of using Dark Souls as your inspiration, use the inspiration for Dark Souls, Berserk as your inspiration. Maybe you'll come up with something new that way. Um, inspiration can come from anywhere.
That's a good point to make, and just in general, that inspiration can come from anywhere, uh, whether that's good inspiration or bad. And I only say that more so as a statement of my own bad luck trying to draw inspiration from things that, just because you really like the idea doesn't mean it's good. Um, you can be incredibly passionate or committed to something, and it be a horrible, horrible idea. And again, that's more from my own experience in my own life, and it's a hard lesson to learn. Um, but yeah, anyway, not going down that rabbit hole, not the time or place.
Okay. Okay.
Uh, so Nix, I am also curious. Just because I like to when I talk to people, I like to know, their life outside of gaming, what they do, who they are outside of games. Uh, and it's this is a the answer of, well, it is just games, is also a very valid and fair answer to this question. But outside of it, what kind of hobbies do you have? What kind of things do you enjoy doing?
Mhm. And it's mostly games, but I I'm right now it's games. I play the games. I make the games. I sometimes watch anime. I hate it for the most part. I don't know why I try to torture myself like this. Every now and then I find a good one and it makes it worth it, and then I watch like five terrible ones after. But I'm the kind of person that like picks up hobbies and drops them really quickly. I did photography, aquariums. It's just like a year later, I'm just over it. But gaming is the one thing that both playing and making games is the one thing I've been passionate about for my whole life. Hopefully that'll continue.
So, because of that, and I apologize, but I have to wade into this one. Um, Speaking of bad anime, then,
Okay.
and I'll extend this afterwards. But speaking of bad anime, um, what is the worst, most recent one? And I apologize if this is also unintentionally walking into a hot
Oh man.
take.
Um, the worst, most recent one. I can't remember. I honestly, it's all a horrible blur. There's a period where I watched like four, and I just dropped them like two episodes in. I don't even remember. I think Violet Evergarden was one of them. It wasn't bad. I was just bored. Um, I guess if you wanna, I don't even know if this is a hot take anymore. I think the studio director VA might disagree. I hate Sword Art Online so much. Like, I'm not over it. I'm never gonna be over it. It disappoints me because I think it's bad, but it had a good idea and it like ruined it, and it makes me angry.
So, thank you, thank you. Um, I I enjoyed Sword Art when it first came out.
Mhm.
I'm not going to get into my complex hatred of it because, realistically, it's from what I've seen, what I've read, it's always the same. But at the end of the day, it's incredibly edgelordy for what the real plot is. And I really don't want to even get into it because I don't want to talk about that on the podcast. Um, but, when they leaned into the same, I'm just going to say gently, damsel in distress trope,
Mhm.
um, and kept repeating that minor, major plots, whatever. I was one, not a fan of that, but also I'm a far bigger fan of the, I'm going to say, much better done dot hack universe, which kind of does a similar thing, but is, in my opinion, not as edgelordy, or edgelordy at all. Is a little more complex, is a little more enjoyable, and by my standards, and my opinions and all that personally. But no, I understand completely for sword art. Um, I I do not like it. So I am 100% on your side, and I imagine whatever take you would take on it is probably much in line with mine,
Yeah.
in some way or another. And I'm gonna make this recommendation because I love making this recommendation. If you ever want to watch a horrible series or a horrible whatever, it's I think it's like 26 episodes, maybe 13. Um, it doesn't really matter. It's older. But if you 12, it's 12 episodes. If you ever want to punish yourself, I encourage you to watch something called Tagaino no Chi or Blood of the Reprimanded Dog. Um,
Okay.
it is so bad that I think the studio with the budget about halfway through even decided to try and like squirrel the budget elsewhere, because you'd have like characters that were like 5 feet tall being like 6 feet tall in one scene next to a character and then like back to their normal height. Like it's all over the place after I think the ratings said no, this is garbage, no one's watching it. So they just sort of said who cares? If you
Ah,
ever want to punish yourself, I would recommend it because it's horrible. Um, Absolutely horrible,
good.
which is a hard thing for me to say, or sorry, which is a wild thing for me to say, seeing as I've watched a lot of anime throughout my life. So for me to be able to say the absolute worst is this, and I think it beats a lot of others in terms of badness. Yeah. Anyway,
Jeez, worse
but
than
with
Sword Art Online.
oh yes, not for the plot. The plot in this
Yeah.
one's absolute garbage. I'm not gonna lie, it's absolute garbage. Um, it's kind of like a battle royale kind of thing, but yeah, it's just
Ah,
garbage.
okay.
Um, Not even a good battle royale kind of thing. Um, but with that in mind, what is a good series then that you know can think that you enjoy or
Ooh.
you'd recommend?
Phew. The the three ones that I've seen most recently that I liked are all hard to recommend because they're all actually pretty flawed. And I think there are a lot of people out there would unwish list Santicado after me saying I hate Sword Art Online and I recommend any of these. But oh man, can I
I'm
even remember?
sorry.
It's fine. It's been a while. Also, okay. I'm just gonna have to like process. I'm just gonna have to work through this. Of course, there's Trigger. Everyone loves Trigger. Um, Kill la Kill is probably my favorite anime, and I hate it too. But I don't hate it. It's just I recognize how stupid it is, and I'm pretty sure the people who made it recognize how stupid it is too. The recent Cyberpunk anime that they made was pretty good. It was flawed at the end. It felt like it needed like two more episodes. I think kind of rushed, but you know what? The visuals were great, and that was good enough for me. At this point, my standards are just dropping so far with anime. If it looks good, that's fine. Prior to that, what was it called? Here and There, Now and Then.
Here and
I,
now, there and or something. Yeah, something like that. Something like
yeah,
that.
Here and There Now. I think it's Here and There Now. And Then. That was really good. Up until the very end, a certain character makes two decisions that are I refuse to believe that they would make. I think they only happen because the script wanted to happen for one of them. Um, and the second is because the author wanted it for political reasons. We'll say have a certain position on a certain hot topic issue. But up until that point, it was really really good. And then the two Wonder Egg Priority, that's the name. That's a frustrating show. Part of it's really great and part of it's really bad. Does that ring a bell to you? Wonder Egg Priority?
Uh, I'm That's a newer series, I think. So no, I haven't seen it myself, I don't think.
Yeah, it's man. I don't even know what to say. I don't even know how to talk about what it's about. Well, I guess it's pretty straightforward. They're these young girls and they know it's a bit subject matter is a bit dark. They know someone who's committed suicide and they find a gotcha machine with eggs in it and they open the egg and there's in their dream, I guess they open it in their dream and there's a girl in it who's also committed suicide, but they have to help them find peace. And if they do that enough, they can bring back the person they knew, bring them back to life. Um, and just the one character, there's a cast of four characters, and one of them is like really well written and really interesting. I don't remember her name. She's the one that's in. She's the wannabe idol character. She's really interesting. And then one of the other ones is really stupid and really anime. It's just so bad. and the end gets weird. I don't know if they ran out of money or something to end, but it's anime, man.
I think that sums it up. Just anime, you
Yeah.
know, with a deep, exasperated sigh to go along with it. Yeah, I've been watching it all my life basically. So, I think anyone who's experienced that, whether it's they've been watching for a little bit or for a long time, they can feel that. They feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Suffering. It's just suffering.
yes, it definitely can be. Yeah. And just to speak to Trigger, I think realistically when it comes to Trigger, you typically know what you sign up for with Trigger. It's you don't
Yeah.
you're walking into that because you want to see what Trigger's going to try and animate, what kind of uh nonsense they might pull. And they usually pull some wild stuff, and usually it pays off in some way, shape, or form. So, Trigger.
Yeah. It's I got I'm a little disappointed Trigger recently because they're like too normal, honestly. This is the Sonic Adventure fan of me coming out because Kill la Kill was so ridiculous. And then after it's like Little Witch Academia, which is fine. It's like kind of a kid show. And Brand New Animal, which is just fine. But it's like, where's the like you've just made Kill la Kill a panty and stocking and garter belt. You're blowing up like paper mache monsters and like using still frame, flipping characters around and kill. I'm not. I don't even know. My mind is breaking trying to like describe what Kill la Kill is like. It's a story where clothes are like evil and the characters are all naked in the end of it, and one of them turns into a spaceship, and now you're making like Little Witch Academia. But Cyberpunk kind of it's inching back. But I heard they're doing Panty and Stocking season 2. I don't
Yeah,
know. Apparently,
I was just about to bring that up. I was about to say, if if that's what you've been missing, then that was announced. I don't know for when, but that has been announced. So at the very least, you will get a sequel that should, and fingers crossed, hopes go back to the wildness and absurdity that is Trigger.
yeah. I don't know. I don't know why you'd make a season 2 of Panty and Stocking with Garter Belt if you weren't gonna do that. That was Gynax. They had to like get that from them. They're committed.
Yeah, exactly. That, so you would hope that if they were willing to go, and fight for that, they would be willing to, do it justice, do it the justice that they probably feel it deserves.
Hmm.
So, Nix, with all that in mind, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I do want to let you get going. I want to let you, have an evening, enjoy yourself. However, if there was anything else you want to discuss, another cool game, something else about, Silent Santicado that you were doing, or something you just feel more people should be aware of, by all means, the floor is yours. And please let everyone know where they can find more information about you and the game, which I'll also be including in the episode description.
Yeah. Um. Well, you can follow me on Twitter, NixPix Games. I think that's what I go by. Well, let me check. It's been a while since I've been on Twitter. NixPix Games. Sure. At NixPix Games. The game Silent Santicado. You can find that on Steam. Go ahead, give us that wish list. Matters for some algorithm somewhere, I think, even when the game isn't out yet. And that's it. That's all I got. Give me your money at some point in the future when Santicado comes out.
You know, I'm it is on my wish list, so I also, I would encourage other people to take a look, and, if this game is their jam, also add it to their wish list because, for me it looks like it's going to be fun. The art style, like I said, especially speaks to me on a very nostalgic level. So I'm looking forward to it on that grounds alone. But from the gameplay, a little bit of gameplay that's popped out, and what the foundation, or I should say what the inspiration behind it is, I think it'll be a lot of people's jams. Like, it is mine, and I hope other people also, just because I want to see this game succeed. I always like to see games succeed. So, it might feel kind of what's the word? Um pandering, I guess, to say I want to see it succeed, but I genuinely want to see, every game succeed. It's a game where people are putting in, thought and care and what have you. I think at the very minimum, people should get to experience it, and it should be successful for the people that kind of bare their souls, if you know.
Yeah, talking about Symphony of the Night and all that. Yeah, but yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. We're gonna work hard, make sure it's a good game that deserves whatever amount of anticipation it gets, meets whatever its expectations are.
And I wish you and the rest of the team, at VA Studios the best of luck in doing that because I've tried making a game a few times, or I've made one in the past. Nothing ever came of it. What have you? What have you? What have you? The standard life of someone who knows how to develop just enough to do something stupid. Um, you know, I I know how hard it can be, is what I'm trying to say, and it's just in general. So, I wish you guys the best of luck in completing it, getting it out there, and finding success.
Thank you very much.
So, Nix, if there wasn't anything else, I will let you get on with your evening.
Yeah, all right. Sounds good. I got some Genshin dailies I got to do. Got my PS4 on sleep mode right now.
Well, hopefully those dailies go well for you then.
Thank you.
So, thanks again, Nix, for making time to have this conversation with me, and thank you for joining us on the Red Tunic podcast, as well as a special thanks to Ron Jenkins for the use of music from the title track from Roads Deep. And if you like this podcast and want to support it and help it grow, please subscribe or follow me on Twitter at Red Tunic Podcast to receive the latest episodes and news, and be sure to share it with those you think might also enjoy it. Thanks, until next time.